Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has humiliated President Trump, taking Trump's ultimatum, final deadline for peace, and putting it in the paper shredder. Instead, forcing Trump to host him in Alaska. Just how did the president go from talking tough on Vladimir Putin to suddenly doing everything he wants in exchange for literally nothing? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Russia, China, and the United States all have one thing in common. Their most elite, secretive units aren't commandos, they're hackers. Why? Because in the modern world, the internet and the personal information that everyone keeps on it are invaluable. Even if you aren't in the national security world, run a search on yourself. Look at how much information is out there. Names, address, phone number, family members. It's terrifying. Even scarier is that getting this information doesn't require a clandestine hacker. Data brokers are private companies that collect, aggregate, and sell off your data to the highest bidder. Those can be telemarketers, robocallers, scammers, and more. That's why I need to tell you about today's sponsor, Aura. See, data brokers are legally required to remove your data if you request it, but submitting a unique request to each one is designed to be tedious. Aura steps in by scanning the web to find which brokers are selling your data and automatically submits opt-out requests on your behalf. They'll even reduce junk mail and telemarketing calls so you don't have to deal with them. You can check how many data brokers have your info by using my link, aura.com/combat. Try it free for 2 weeks and see just how much of your data is floating around. The link is in the description, or you can scan the QR code. Beyond that, Aura is an all-in-one security solution. It comes with a VPN, a password manager, real-time credit and identity theft monitoring, internet parental controls, even malware protection for your devices. It's a full internet safety suite inside a single app. They also have 24/7 US-based support and $5 million in identity theft insurance protection. Let Aura keep you and your personal data safe. Sign up today using my link and you'll get a free 2-week trial to see just how much of your data is exposed. Trust me, you'll be surprised. Go to aura.com/combat to start your free trial. It's linked below, or you can scan the QR code. Now, this story starts with, of course, Steve Witkoff. Why? Because, as we've talked about, Steve Witkoff, President Trump's special envoy, who is, well, pretty special, who, of course, had an in-person multi-hour meeting with Vladimir Putin just a few days ago. Now, you might recall that Steve Witkoff has had his fingerprints on almost every failed effort by the Trump administration. He is somehow both responsible for the Russia-Ukraine peace negotiations and the Israel-Hamas ceasefire negotiations. Now, as we have talked about, Steve Witkoff has never worked in government, has never conducted any kind of international diplomacy or business at all. In fact, literally 200 days ago, Steve Witkoff was doing deals to buy condos in Florida, right? So this is somebody who is eminently ill-qualified for the job. But, you know, how hard can it be to talk to people? Well, Steve Witkoff, again, has shown us that, remember, the war was going to be over in one day, according to President Trump when he was elected. Obviously, Steve Witkoff not able to get that deal done. But also, you might recall, Steve Witkoff organized the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal that immediately fell apart. And afterward, Israel began its policy of starving the people of Gaza. So Steve Witkoff is actually probably going to go down in history as actually, unironically, one of the worst diplomats to ever live. But again, in this administration, apparently, if you fail, you can fail your way right back to the office of Vladimir Putin, because Steve Witkoff went in to talk to Vladimir, and what he emerged with sounded like major concessions from President Putin. Putin, for example, had said that he was going to withdraw from the regions of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, contested regions that Russia currently occupies large portions of, and then in exchange, the Ukrainians would withdraw from the portions of Donetsk and Luhansk that they control. Now, bear in mind, guys, that this isn't Steve Witkoff or the United States' place to make these negotiations, but just to create this level of proposal, one that actually involves Russian forces retrograding, giving up territory that they've seized, would reflect a massive shift in Putin's stance. And it was significant, right? It really might have even reflected progress. Unfortunately, Steve Witkoff didn't actually understand what Putin was saying. Despite reportedly him using a US translator this time, he still managed to completely misunderstand. And what likely happened, honestly, is that Putin realized that Witkoff misunderstood, or he was intentionally phrasing things in a cryptic way that would be difficult for Witkoff to discern what was going on. And because he doesn't have the diplomatic sophistication to read into these kind of things or understand the sort of games that Putin plays, he simply took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. So Witkoff goes back to the White House and says, guys, Vladimir Putin made major concessions. Well, he didn't. You see, turns out that the EU said, guys, there's no way Putin said that. And it's because he didn't. Because Putin didn't say that his forces would withdraw from Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. No. He said that Ukrainian forces were supposed to withdraw from Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. That's right. Putin's stance is, if you want a ceasefire, Ukraine, you have to abandon all the defensive territory that you have established up until this point. What do I mean? Well, you might recall that Ukraine, in this war of attrition, has become very, very good at the defense, right? And when you zoom out, you can see that you have the administrative borders of Luhansk, you have Donetsk, you have Zaporizhzhia, you have Kherson. Well, there's some problems. The first is that the Ukrainians, because this Russian offensive has been such a failure, the Ukrainians have had literally a year, sometimes even, in some cases even longer, to build elaborate in-depth defenses. In fact, the slower the Russian advances, the more time the Ukrainians have to build better defensive positions, the harder it is for Russia to continue its advances, right? So Russia has said, well, what if I was to just force the Ukrainians to abandon their prepared defensive positions, right? So again, these are anchored, they call it the fortress belt or fortress cities, right? A link ranging from Kramatorsk down to Pokrovsk and then into, I think, some of these areas here like Pokrovsk. And this whole idea is that, and there's probably other Ukrainian fortifications they've built over the last 12 months that are not even publicly known, but it's almost certain that they have done so. And so the fact is that Russia said, listen, if I can just force the Ukrainians to withdraw from some of these contested regions, I get to leapfrog right over their defensive efforts. In fact, by forcing the Ukrainians to leave everything they've built and start from scratch, not only is Russia going to be able to take the offensive fight to them much more effectively, they are going to never be able to have that territory retaken because they are now going to possess robust defensive constructs, right? It's not actually all that hard to, take the concertina wire and put it on the other direction and make it a Russian defensive line. So this is, of course, a huge fuck up. But again, misunderstandings happen in international diplomacy, usually not this badly. But what's really crazy is that this has resulted in still President Trump announcing that he is going to be hosting Vladimir Putin in Alaska, literally next week. Now, you might ask yourself, Paul, Trump and Putin have been speaking on the phone almost once a month up until this point. What exactly is the reason for Vladimir Putin to think that he's going to achieve something by meeting Trump in person, right? That can't be done over the phone. And the answer is these meetings hold symbolic value. And what do you think the symbolism is of Alaska? Why, it's technically a territory that used to belong to Russia that some Russian irredentists, some Russian ultranationalists believe should be reliberated by Russia. And that itself is, pretty troubling. And it's almost sort of acknowledging these crazies are out there in Russia, that this claim that Alaska has some kind of Russian connection is somehow valid. By the way, the Russian population of Alaska is zero, zilch, nada. Alaskans are completely Americans. But there's a deeper story here, right? And this is the fact that this meeting forces Trump really to eat his words, to ignore numerous pledges he has made to do the opposite. The first pledge that we got to talk about is that Trump said that he would require Putin to meet with Zelensky in order to achieve a meeting with him, given that Putin said, this is something I want. And if you know anything about negotiation, when someone tells you outright, I want X, you go, great, time for me. You need to give me Y, right? That's how negotiations work. Now, again, not always. Sometimes you do these little piddly things as what are called good faith gestures, an opportunity to show that you're capable of more serious negotiations. But that ship sailed, guys, especially in this, right? So when asked, hey, Trump, you said that, the White House, an official, by the way, this was the official White House press. This wasn't like a leaked rumor or whatever. Trump said, well, Putin doesn't actually have to do that, which is crazy. So the US president says, this is my red line. You will meet with Zelensky. And Putin goes, no, I'm not. What I want you guys to understand, here's how to understand what this performance is. And I think this is sort of a larger reflection of, but actually, you know what? We're not going to get to that. That's going to be later because there's more evidence here. So Trump already goes, no, actually, I decided that Putin can just meet with me. He doesn't have to meet with Zelensky. He said, they want to meet with me and I'll do whatever I can to stop the killing, which, as we've pointed out, Trump himself has acknowledged that talking with Russia doesn't stop the killing. So instead, it's just the first two parts. It's they'd like to meet with me and I'll do whatever Putin wants. Right? But that's not the only problem. You can see here that Marco Rubio actually literally on Wednesday, 3 days ago, said that, president's going to meet Vladimir Putin and Zelensky at some point here, hopefully in the near future. But Rubio said there's a lot that has to happen before Trump can meet with Putin. Well, obviously that's not true because, again, Steve Witkoff misunderstood Putin and suddenly this meeting was on. Absolutely preposterous. Here's the other thing that's kind of fucked up. Is that this isn't the only things that Trump sort of is ignoring in making this meeting, giving Putin something he wants. Remember, Dmitry Medvedev, who we talked about, he's a troll, but he is also a Russian government official and is a former president of Russia currently sitting on Russia's version of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He literally threatened President Trump. So the preposterousness of the fact that this is, you can threaten the fucking life of the president. And Trump is going to be like, well, listen. And Trump acknowledges, right? Trump literally is like, I read this. He says, Russia and USA do no business together, and tell Medvedev, the failed former president of Russia, who thinks he's still president, to watch his words. He's entering very dangerous territory. So again, like the idea that you can threaten the president and then he'll still just roll over and bring you to his home, bring you into his home country. Like, can you imagine the level of being a bitch that is? Right? You may also recall that yesterday, August 8th, was the day that Trump was like, hey, I want to, I'm going to apply secondary sanctions to countries that buy Russian oil, right? These countries are China, India, and Turkey, but also countries like Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. Now, Trump has kind of alluded to a 50% tariff on India, but he hasn't gone after the big dogs. He hasn't gone after China. He hasn't gone after Turkey. And so all of these things, all of these are stances that the president has taken that he's had to pretend no longer exist in order to give Putin this meeting, right? So you may ask, and the question that we're all kind of asking is, what has Putin given up exactly? If he hasn't actually changed his stance, he's only demanded that Ukrainians withdraw from their existing prepared fortified positions in order to basically resume fighting. Because remember, this offer isn't a peace offer. It is a ceasefire. But there was already ceasefires, and Vladimir Putin has already violated those ceasefires. In fact, in most cases, those ceasefires were simply a few days or even a few hours in length. And I can tell you, I have contacts on the Ukrainian front lines who said these ceasefires, Russia never adhered to them. So imagine giving up real, meaningful, your best prepared defensive positions in exchange for a ceasefire that you're almost certain your opponent is either not going to respect or is simply going to go, okay, it's been 3 days. Oh, the ceasefire is over. right? Ceasefire's over. Oh, I tried to negotiate a lasting peace deal. It didn't happen. Now we're resuming our offensive, right? Absolutely a preposterously bad deal. So Vladimir Putin has yielded nothing, is getting incredible acts of really submission by the U.S. president. And the question is, why is this so embarrassing, right? You're like, it's just a meeting. Well, Vladimir Putin is never going to simply take a small win when a chance to make a big win is possible, right? You don't become president of Russia, an oligarchic quasi-criminal state, by being somebody who doesn't know how to win big when you have the opportunities to. And this is kind of the this is the thinking that Putin has, that he's trying to achieve here, that he has achieved here, in fact, right? And sure, Vladimir Putin will have managed to stall out Trump's efforts to imply secondary sanctions, an actual consequence, an actual use of economic force against Russia. Up until this point, Trump has only made Ukraine's position worse. Russia has continued to trend completely neutral. And for the first time, it seemed like he might be sort of considering introducing real consequences to Russia for their failure to negotiate in good faith. Again, something that Trump himself has said, Vladimir Putin is not negotiating in good faith. And that's sort of part of it here, is that Putin's win is also in the fact that the U.S. is losing credibility, right? Now imagine you're one of hundreds of U.S. security partners or economic partners around the world, right? Look at how many countries say, listen, we do a bunch of things that the U.S. asks us to do because they are a big, powerful military that always backs their friends, right? And imagine a world in which the U.S. simply rolls over. It ignores everything that we just talked about. It ignores the fact that the president literally on Wednesday was like, Vladimir Putin, you have to meet with President Zelensky. Then Vladimir Putin goes, no, I'm not. And he goes, okay, right? It forces him to ignore the fact that he was threatened by a member of the Russian government. He goes, oh, that's okay. Those things happen, right? It ignores his own personal deadlines against Vladimir Putin. And so what happens? And it ignores, by the way, the huge array of failed summits. Remember, this is not the first. This is not even the second effort to get a Russian and Ukrainian peace delegation to talk. So if talking was going to be the solution, without changing the fundamental realities of the Russian calculus, this is not it, right? Because remember, there was a U.S.-Russia summit in Saudi Arabia that was supposed to achieve the exact same things that this is going to achieve. You also, of course, right, following that summit, right, the U.S. and Ukrainians had their blow up. There was, again, the 30-day total ceasefire proposal that got rejected. There was a U.S. and Ukrainian summit in Jeddah that was supposed to involve Russia, but never did. Then, of course, there was the Easter truce. And then the U.S., remember, in April 23rd, the U.S. made its ultimate final peace proposal, which you might recall Russia also rejected. In fact, Ukraine also rejected it. So, again, and then in May, Russia and Ukrainian delegations held direct talks in Istanbul. And, right, of course, the delegations did nothing. Vladimir Putin sent somebody leading the delegation who was basically a nobody. And this is just a reflection of the fact that Russia's never had to give up anything. And the U.S., every time it makes these sort of stances, every time it says this is how things have to be, because we're the most powerful military, we're the most powerful economy, and we defend our allies and oppose our enemies. It's very simple. And so every time he makes the U.S., he humiliates the United States, humiliates the president by showing that his word is worthless. And by doing that, what he's doing is he's damaging not just the United States, but he's damaging every other alliance that the U.S. has. Imagine you're Taiwan and you see this. Can you imagine how Taiwan is thinking and feeling right now about the United States, about their partnership with the United States? Imagine how South Korea is feeling about their partnership with the United States, right? So, again, imagine how Japan is feeling about their partnership with the United States, but multiply that across hundreds of relationships that the U.S. has with key strategic partners around the world. And those strategic partners believe that because they are good players, they are good teammates of the United States, that in exchange, the U.S. will back them up when they have conflicts, particularly with their autocratic enemies, right? And I want to point this out, right? And it's already happening because, the Indians, right? We talked about the fact that Trump is trying to play hardball with the Indians. They're saying, listen, India, you're a valuable U.S. ally. You're a fellow democracy. You are a critical counterweight to Chinese influence in Asia. But you can't be Russia's friend too. And well, what happened after Trump made these threats? Why, the Indian prime minister went to Vladimir Putin. This is August 8th. And he said, I reaffirm my commitment to deepen ties with Russia. And why wouldn't you? If you're India, which looks like the more reliable security partner, which looks like the person who you can deal with, who's going to be true to their word, right? What happens if China decides I'm taking that contested Indian territory and India goes, listen, America, you have to help us. You're our friend. We've been your friend. Well, does the Indian prime minister think that what? The president's going to say what? I'll end that conflict with India and China in a day. 2 weeks. I'm going to send my best real estate buddy to misunderstand what the Chinese want. Oh, actually, the Chinese have to settle this in 2 weeks. No, a month. No, actually, I'm going to invite Xi Jinping over to the White House for dinner. If you're India, you're going to go, where's the part where you defend us? We're your ally. We're your friend. Why are you hamming it up, giving in to our enemy? So if you're India, you go, no, I need a friend who I can trust. And Vladimir Putin's a dictator, and he's an asshole, and he's selfish. But when he says he's going to do something, he does it. And that counts for something. Again, that's why Vladimir Putin has continually backed the Assad government up until the point that Assad literally is living in Russia right now. Can't say the same for many U.S. allies. But, it's also about showing who's the bitch. Like, I don't know how else to tell you this. Let's say you're at work, right? There's a CEO and an intern. When that CEO goes to that intern and says, hey, you're going to meet with me. And the intern, he goes, okay, sure. As soon as I finish this spreadsheet, right? As soon as I do this, as soon as I do that, these other things have to happen first. You don't tell the CEO that. CEO's the boss. The CEO's the man. He says what things happen. That spreadsheet can wait. We all know this intrinsically, right? We know who has the power because a smart intern is never even going to say that to the CEO, right? A dumb intern will say, okay, I just got to finish this spreadsheet. And what's the CEO going to do? He's going to say, no, you don't. You're meeting with me. Get your stuff, right? Well, what happens if you don't know who the CEO and the intern is? When you just watch that interaction? Well, you already know who's in charge and who's the intern, right? So use that paradigm to look at this relationship. Who's the intern and who's the CEO? Vladimir Putin has said, I'm meeting with you, President Trump, in Alaska. President Trump has said, oh no, I need you to meet with Zelensky first. And Putin goes, no, I don't. I'm meeting with you in Alaska. Do you see how now, let's say both the intern and CEO knock on your office door and they say, listen, I want you to come work for me. That intern, you're going to go, listen, you're a fucking loser here. And the CEO, you're going to say, you're a big dog. You're the big dog. I know it. Again, you don't need to see the title. They don't wear a badge that says CEO. You just know it because that's how these dynamics work. And so that is ultimately what Putin is trying to do here. He is trying to assert not just to the international community, but to the Russian public and even to the American public that he is the CEO, that he is in charge of this operation. He decides when the war ends, not President Trump, not the EU, not NATO, right? And remember, if you're a U.S. ally, right, you look at this and you go, oh my God, did we just align ourselves with the intern? Because again, in the international community, we don't wear the labels. We only find out who's the CEO and who's the intern by interactions with like this. And right now, you look at Russia cementing their part, India choosing Russia over the United States. You look at the president being threatened literally by the Russian government and just turning around and going, yeah, come into my house. I mean, imagine if you were like a father, right? You're the head of, you're the protector of your family, and someone threatens your family, says, I'm gonna kill your family, right? You better watch out or I'm gonna do something to you. That's what Medvedev said to Trump. And then a week later, you bring him into your home? That's insane. You would assume if you saw someone like that, you would be like, the person who threatened them must be like God. They must be like a crime boss. They must be like the president of something. They must be fabulously rich. They must be incredibly powerful that they can treat people like this, and those people just take it. And so again, that is the takeaway here. It is about Vladimir Putin's not looking to win just in Ukraine. He wants to remake the world order. And this has been something that has been his policy since the 90s. He wants to remake the world order into something called a Eurasian, what he's calling a Eurasian security architecture, or a Eurasian, like Russia as a Eurasian power, right? And he refers to, of course, the US and Western Europe as Atlanticists. He wants to destroy the Atlanticists with their human rights and their democracies and their institutions and their liberal BS. And he says, listen, the future is a dictatorship where I, Vladimir Putin, and my successors rule with an iron fist. We kill who we want to kill. We dominate countries. We carve them up as we want them to be. And that's the final thing to take away here, is that Ukraine points out, hey, the president of the United States is not the president of Ukraine. He cannot give up territory. He cannot yield territory to the Ukrainians or to the Russians. And even Zelensky himself says, I can't do it. We're a democracy. The only people that can do it are the Ukrainian people or their representatives. That is the only way this can happen. And that, I think, is the biggest takeaway here, is that this idea that being an American security partner means that your sovereignty gets respected, right? We were seen, the reason the US is so powerful internationally is that despite all the BS, is that when you were our friend, you got the best deal in history. Normally, countries operate like Russia. Russia dominates Belarus. They install a puppet government and they extract resources from Belarus into Russia. The Belarusian poverty rate, the Belarusian life is terrible under this pro-Russian regime. In the United States, we say, listen, we ask basically that you kind of respect human rights, that you embrace free trade, right? And that you help us in achieving certain specific geopolitical objectives. And in exchange, you have almost you have total sovereignty over your country. Again, we make very few demands. Those demands, most often like free trade, enrich your country, right? And you have just, like complete autonomy and sovereignty, and it gets respected. The US will defend it. Not so anymore. Now it's about, if you're big, you carve up, you decide what the little guys do, and the little guys just have to take it. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Of course, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.